All right, good morning. It's great to have each one here on this cold morning. We're going to finish out chapter number 10. Well, we're going to go as far as verse 19. The rest of it I'll leave until we hit chapter number 11 because it really rolls on into chapter number 11. So I'm going to put it with that part of the teaching, and we'll just finish up, and then next week you'll have Pastor Jeff. So Daniel 10 has been, for me, an amazing chapter. And I've learned so much and been encouraged throughout the series. Understanding that God is in control, as Brother Dave shared this morning, has taken on a new meaning for me in the last couple of days. Daniel 10 serves as a gateway to the profound revelations or explanations of the vision and the revelations found in chapters number 11 and 12. Daniel 10 sets the stage for one of the most detailed prophetic visions in Scripture. In this chapter, Daniel is given a glimpse into the spiritual realm where unseen battles rage between the heavenly forces. He's overwhelmed by the vision, physically weakened yet strengthened by divine encouragement. This moment of preparation is crucial as it readies Daniel to receive the intricate prophecy that unfolds in the following chapters. Chapter 11 delves into the historical and future conflicts between the kingdoms, revealing the rise and fall of leaders, while chapter 12 shifts the focus to the ultimate triumph of God's people, the resurrection and the final judgment. Without the foundation laid in chapter number 10, where Daniel is spiritually fortified and made ready, the weight of revelations in chapter 11 and 12 would have been too great to bear. Thus, Daniel 10 is not merely an isolated vision, but an essential introduction, ensuring that the prophet, and by extension the reader, is prepared to grasp the magnitude of what is to come. I wonder, can you imagine standing before the pre-incarnate Christ, standing before this ministering angel, this divine messenger, and being overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what you're seeing? In Daniel chapter number 10, verses 15 to 19, we find the prophet Daniel in a moment of profound weakness. His strength drained, his spirit trembling. Yet in this vulnerable state, God does not leave him helpless. Through words of encouragement and a divine touch, Daniel is revived, strengthened, and reassured. This passage reminds us that God meets us in our weakness. When life's burdens weigh us down, when fear grips our hearts, and when we feel powerless, the Lord speaks words of life and touches us with His presence, restoring our strength. Just as Daniel was lifted up, we too can find renewed courage and endurance through God's unfailing love. This chapter begins with Daniel mourning and fasting, seeking understanding from God regarding the vision and regarding His people. It is during this time of deep spiritual reflection that he is granted the remarkable insight into the spiritual realm, which reveals the ongoing struggle between the angelic hosts and the powers of darkness. In verses 15 to 19, we had a glimpse into Daniel's reaction to this revelation. In verse 15, he says, "And when he had spoken such words unto me," the words about what would happen to Israel in the later days, the words of encouragement, he said, "I set my face downward to the ground and became dumb." Daniel became silent. Once again, Daniel finds himself in a familiar state. And as we read through these next few verses, it's going to sound like, didn't we just look at this just a little while ago? Daniel finds himself in a familiar state, much like we found him in verses 8 and 9. However, this time Daniel doesn't entirely collapse. Though still overwhelmed, he is deeply affected by the weight of the vision and the intensity of the moment. The powerful presence of the heavenly being, the sheer majesty of his appearance, and the reassurance that he had come in response to Daniel's prayer left the prophet utterly awestruck. The weight of the moment was intensified by the realization that this messenger carried profound revelation concerning the future of his people. Daniel was worried about the immediate future, but God was about to show him the long-term future of his people. Unable to grasp the immensity of what he was witnessing, Daniel bowed his head in reverence and was struck dumb by the experience. Is there any one of us that would not be like Daniel in the same situation? Overwhelmed with awe and struck into profound silence. Look at verse 16. And behold. Now, folks, we said this before, but whenever you see that word behold hung out in scripture like that, it's like an ancient signboard that signifies there are riches and there are treasures within. He said, one like the similitude of the Son of Man touched my lips. Notice Daniel draws attention to the one who resembled a human being. Daniel's mouth was touched by the one with a human appearance, which in this context most certainly was probably the ministering angel. And I think Daniel distinguishes the angel from the pre-incarnate Christ. The angel had the appearance of a man, a description that is simple and straightforward. It's straight to the point. He said, the one that looked like a man touched my lips. Whereas when he saw the Son of God, the description was much more grandiose. He was described as wearing linen with a golden belt. His appearance was bright and intense. His body shone, his face was radiant, his eyes were like fire. His arms and feet looked like polished metal. His voice was loud and powerful like the sound of a crowd. I don't think Daniel was really trying to draw attention to the angel. I think he was trying to distinguish between the two beings. I think what he was trying to draw attention to was not the angel himself, but what the angel did, the touching of his lips. You see, the angel was meeting the most pressing need in Daniel's life. The ability to speak, his speech. The angel, when you get on at about verse number 20, actually says to Daniel, do you understand what this vision is about? And for Daniel to answer that question, he needed to be able to speak. So the greatest need at this point in Daniel's life was the need to speak. And God met that need. God's provision was the angel touching his lips. And that formula is repeated throughout Scripture. When God's prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel encountered God, they were struck dumb. The vision or the message left them utterly weak, needing the enabling touch of the Lord to enable them to stand or even speak. And that's exactly what we see here in Daniel. The heavenly visitor is ministering to Daniel's needs. And again, Daniel describes for us in vivid detail the results of being in the presence of a glorified being. But the wider picture here is simpler. Daniel's need was met by the Lord, and it reminds us that God sees our needs and will meet our needs. You know, I'm preaching to myself this morning. I wonder if the method God used to meet Daniel's needs was one that he was expecting. And this teaches me, one, that God's going to meet my needs. He sees my needs, he will meet my needs. But it also teaches me that it may not be in the way that I expect it. God's ways are not my ways. So when God meets my needs, I need to be open to a methodology that may not be what I expect it to be. Look at the rest of verse 16. Then I opened my mouth and spake and said unto him that stood before me, O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me, and I have retained no strength. For how can the servant of this my Lord talk with this my Lord? For as for me, straightway there remained no strength in me, neither is there any breath left in me. Here we see Daniel's continuing sense of weakness and inadequacy. The ministering angel, both gracious and majestic, reached out and touched the prophet. Yet the prophet still did not dare to lift his eyes. The sheer awe of the angel's presence was so overwhelming that even the eloquent Daniel was left speechless. Being graciously touched by the divine visitor, Daniel's speech was restored, and he gives almost what appears to be an apology. He's almost apologetic in his exclamation of his inability to converse intelligently with the visitor. If you take this verse out of the King James, and it comes out something like this. He says to the angel, I am overwhelmed with the anguish because of the vision, my Lord, and I feel very weak. How can I, your servant, talk with you, my Lord? My strength is gone and I can hardly breathe. He was quite overcome by the sorrows that would affect or impact the world in general, but how that vision would impact his own people. And I think given the awesomeness of what he had seen, the pre-incarnate Christ, this angel, being able to see into the spiritual realm, you have all of that, and then you have the fact that he's fasted for 21 days, and he's an older man, probably in his mid-80s by this stage. That's a lot. And it's no wonder that he was so affected by this. So we've seen Daniel's weakness revealed. Let's look at Daniel's weakness removed. Look at verse 18. Then there came again and touched me one like the appearance of a man, and he strengthened me. And he said, O man, greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be unto thee. Be strong. Yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened and said, Let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. As Daniel stood in awe, still trembling from the overwhelming presence before him, the heavenly figure reaches out one more time, touching him with a reassuring hand. Strength surges through his weary body, reviving him from the weakness that had overtaken him. It is interesting how God is meeting Daniel's needs through this angel. He touched him to restore his speech. He touched to speak when speechless. Then he touched to be strengthened when he was without strength. Again, Daniel's need was strength. God's provision was the angel's strengthening touch. The voice that followed was filled with compassion and authority. He said to Daniel, do not be afraid. You are highly esteemed. Peace be with you. Doesn't that remind you of the time after the resurrection when Jesus appeared and the first thing he said to those that he appeared to was, peace be unto you? Peace be with you. Be strong now. Be strong. These words were not merely spoken, they carried divine power, lifting Daniel's spirit and restoring his courage. As the weight of the fear and exhaustion melted away, he found himself strengthened, ready to receive the profound revelation that lay ahead. In this moment, Daniel is experiencing firsthand the sustaining grace of God. who does not leave his servant in their weakness, but equips them with their strength, with his strength, to stand firm in his presence. So, let's bring this all together. I start making some personal application here. Daniel had reached his limits. Overwhelmed by the divine vision before him, his strength failed and he collapsed, unable to stand. His body felt powerless and his spirit drained. Yet in his weakness, God did not leave him to struggle alone. Understand that. In his weakness, God did not leave him to struggle alone. He patiently allowed Daniel to process what was happening. He never rushed him. He never rebuked him for his frailty. Instead, he waited, fully understanding the weight that Daniel was carrying. As Daniel lay there, a gentle touch stirred him. A hand reached out, lifting him just enough so that he could get to his hands and feet. Still trembling, but he was on his hands and feet, or his hands and knees, I should say. Then came the words of reassurance. He was highly esteemed, that he had been seen and he was known by God. The encouragement was just not for his physical state, but it was to encourage his soul, to encourage his heart. This was not a moment of condemnation for his weakness. Do you see any condemnation in the words that the angel spoke to Daniel? I can't see how you can take highly esteem and say that's a negative. There was no condemnation. It was grace extended to him in the midst of his weakness. God's presence was not distance, it was near, speaking peace and assurance when Daniel most needed it. Still, Daniel struggled. The vision weighed heavily on him and his strength was not fully restored. But God did not relent. God did not give up. Again, a touch. This time filling him with strength. More words speaking peace into his being, calling him to be strong. And then suddenly something shifted. Daniel felt it. The renewed ability to stand, to listen, to move forward. God had not simply left him to recover on his own. He had actively restored him, giving him strength beyond what he could find within himself. Now let's bring it home. Like Daniel, we may find ourselves unable to stand, unable to carry what is before us. But God will touch us, speak to us, and equip us to keep going. There are moments in our life when weakness feels overwhelming, when exhaustion, fear, and uncertainty leave us feeling completely drained. Maybe you're carrying something heavy, a burden too great to bear, and you don't know how to move forward. In those moments, God does not abandon you. He sees you exactly as you are, with all your struggles, with all your limitations, and yet He patiently waits. He does not rush you to be stronger or expect you to carry the weight alone. Think about Daniel in that moment. Collapsed, powerless before God. He couldn't stand. He couldn't find the strength to respond, and yet God did not scold him for his weakness. Instead, He reached out and touched him and lifted him up. How often do you feel like you're supposed to push through, to be stronger on your own? But God is not asking you to find the strength within yourself. He is offering it to you. Then came the words of reassurance. You are highly esteemed. Let that sink in. Even in Daniel's weakest point in his life. Even when he's down on the ground with his face in the dirt, not feeling particularly spiritual, not feeling particularly strong, maybe not feeling particularly esteemed. God says you are highly esteemed. Even in Daniel's weakness, God saw him as valued, as loved, and as worthy. If you're struggling today, if you feel unseen or uncertain, hear that truth. Hear the truth that God speaks over you. I am accepted in the beloved. Reminding you of who you are in him. You are not defined by how strong you might feel right now. You may feel that there is no strength within you. You may be feeling really weak. But you are seen, you are cherished, you are worthy of his grace, and you are accepted in the beloved. And still, Daniel wasn't instantly restored. The burden was heavy, and he continued to struggle. But God was patient. God was loving. God was kind, and he touched him again, and he strengthened him further. He spoke peace over him, calling him to stand and to press forward. And this is how God works in our lives. He meets us where we're at, in our weakness, in our exhaustion, and he does not stop at just comforting us. He strengthens us so that we can keep moving forward. So what are you carrying today? What weight feels too heavy? If you feel like you have nothing left to give, trust that God sees you. He understands. He is reaching out, ready to touch your heart, to lift you up, to remind you who you are, and to give you the strength you need. His patience never runs out. His grace is never limited. And his strength is always available. You don't have to do it alone. Thank you this morning. That's it.